So it's a real honor to kick off the second day, thank you very much, and a responsibility. So yesterday at this same time, Cal Fan kicked everything off, and he talked about interconnected minds. And I want to lean into that. So my name is Adam. I'm an architect by background. I'm an experienced urban strategist. And I work on projects all around the world, often campus clusters. And I'm always thinking about experiences, the student experience, the passenger experience, the employee experience. I am obsessed by the designed experience. And it took me ages to really find a way to explain it. My mother found it incredibly complicated. So I had to write a book. And the book took 10 years. It's not quite as big as that. And what the book does is it goes back 65,000 years. And it looks at the designed experience and its power to change the way we think, feel, and act. It looks at it as the secret sauce for thriving at scale. And as we look across the 7,000 different languages, 4,000 distinct cultures, we see common methods, common structures, common symbols, common characters. And what's joyous about that is you start to see that fundamentally it is the story, it is the narrative journey that bounds it all together. And what we see is often this arc. We see things that collide with us, things that get our attention. We see things that begin to build our curiosity and connect with us. We then begin to connect and understand the rules of the game. And then we collaborate, we throw ourselves in, and at the end we celebrate. We bang the drum, we tell the story. And whether it's a religious festival, whether it's a cathedral, whether it's a temple, whether it's something that Team Lab are doing in a museum in Dubai, we see this structure everywhere. And if you close your eyes and imagine your ideal designed experience, it may have elements like that. It may have elements that attract, involve, and create a sense of belonging. But this is what we build in our cities. This is a million miles away from what I'm talking about. What we see is developers and investors reducing us to a unit stuck in a unit. And as we look at our devices and see that we can do everything from there, we can play, we can learn, we can share, we can eat, we have no reason to leave. There is so little shared experience in this, so little reason to gather. And if we think about that narrative arc, these things engage, they might be dramatic, they might have names like the Pinnacle, the Vista, the Mirage, but they don't get us involved. And behind the scenes, we see fragmented teams, we see disjointed processes. It's no wonder it doesn't connect. We need an intervention. We need to start afresh. And we have 65,000 years of fine examples that we could bring in. This is how we thrive at scale. Let's use that to better align and guide. Or the way Indian Gang were talking about it yesterday, this could refresh the whole value stack. So let's start there. Let's understand the value of these stories that we walk. So, in the next 3 minutes, I'm going to explain to you what on earth that might mean and how we're going to change the whole property system 5 steps at a time. Firstly, we're going to begin with a pattern language. We're going to riff off Christopher Alexander in 1977. These patterns begin with a challenge. Let's imagine one that speaks of the isolation of elderly men. Let's think about how we might better connect them. Let's think about their sentiment, how they think, feel, and act. Let's imagine the ideal stories that bring them together and get them out of their shell. And let's go behind the scenes. Let's use these patterns to think about what it might mean for the people that host it, the program that brings them together, the place, the process, the policy. Let's break down each one of these patterns. These city life patterns can then nest together. They can be the thing that then can guide and align. It becomes a common language. language, not a thing of architecture or strategy or engineering or project management, something we can all understand. And then from there, from that ideal source, let's imagine a second step, one that speaks of policy. So often, policy, and particularly those first briefs, you'll be amazed, often don't speak about people very much. Or if they do, they have motherhood statements that will speak of inclusion and diversity, but they won't illustrate it, they won't bring it to life. That's where our patterns could be so very useful. Often, this stage will have lots of earnest people with beards and big glasses, looking at plans, worrying about space well utilized. We need to get them to think about time well spent. That will be the shared beginning. And then from there, we then need to quickly start building pilots. We've got that base, we've got the governance arranged, we've built capability, we've built that shared language. Now let's prove it. Let's get out there quickly. Now, what often happens in the built environment is there are those grandiose strategies and those big briefs, and then what happens is a gigantic spaceship of building gets landed on the area with the hope that that island development will change the city. There's often a word used in architecture and built environment work, which is meanwhile. What I'm saying is meanwhile isn't that first step where we have a few hoardings painted by, well, pretended to be painted by children, and then we then build the building thereafter. What I'm saying is we need to be always meanwhile. We're always piloting. We're always prototyping. We're learning from each one of these steps. And these patterns, they can then be beautifully illustrated. They can talk about the sentiment, about what people are thinking, feeling, and doing. And then they can then think about the narrative journey that then will ensure that we attract people, we involve them, and create a sense of belonging. Each one of these pilots we're carefully measuring. With each turn, we're building, we're going further and further, getting bigger and bigger. What we need to then do is we need to be learning on the job. We're constantly measuring. We're not measuring space well utilized, we're measuring time well spent. We are really leaning into those moments that matter. It is that sentiment, that story. It is those fine examples that were gathered in the early patterns, gathered in the early research. That anecdotal, qualitative, delicious information that brings it to life, that is our ever-present watchword here. And what this does is it means there is a lack of hierarchy within this team. This is not about architects and engineers leading everything. It is something that brings together places and spaces, people and culture, technology platforms, all of the value chain, all of the team, managed by a more creative direction way of working. I don't know if you've ever worked in the film world or the rock and roll world, but what you often see is the show is the most important thing. There was a wonderful old producer I know who used to be the producer and tour manager for Pink Floyd. And he used to talk about dollars per clap. What he liked about that is the clap. The fact you're moving your audience is fundamental to everything we're doing. So we're learning on the job. We have universities, colleges. We are bringing in, we're teaching not just students, but government, architects, everybody. We are building a community of practice. And then from there, we need to then radiate that out. We need to not be shy. We need to make sure that these narratives are flying far and wide. And because we've begun with stories, we're in a much better shape to then tell those stories beyond. And I'm not talking about stories of silhouettes, stories of pinnacles, stories of crazy gestures. I'm talking about the stories of how we move people. I'm talking about the stories of the moments that matter, that don't speak about isolated island developments, but speak about those horizontal connections across the cities. In this way, we build stewardship. we build a care across generations. And also because we're always referring back to the patterns, whether it's Upalo in Fiji or whether it's Matthias in Frankfurt, we have that common language constantly collecting us to each other. So, from then, this living system, the way I'd like to bring it to an end, because I'm clearly very enthusiastic about this, is what I think we need to do is we need to think about this living framework as a new way to begin the conversation in the world of architecture and property. I saw yesterday a real sense of urgency in the air. And I think in many ways, our built environment lets us down. If we think about Stuart Brand and Brian Eno's pace layers, what we see is culture spinning at such speed that the physicality of our built environment can't keep up. What I'm saying here is what we need is an intervention. If we better concentrate on how we attract people, how we involve them, and how we create that sense of belonging, then that narrative journey can then reinforce, align, and guide and optimize every decision thereafter. And critically, I think it will bring more purpose, more humanity, and more joy to the process. There isn't nearly enough joy. For me, that is the joy of the shared experience, the joy of the transformational experience. Now, I've been gathering these patterns now for 25 years. But what I need investors, developers, technologists, creatives, architects, community activists the world over to start bringing this together. We need to start again. We need a new conversation. So, do get in touch, do join in. Let's create a city life ecosystem that is worth living in. Thank you very much.